Hi, my name is Rick, and welcome back, or welcome to the channel if this is the first time you're seeing me here. I do occasional loop instructional videos focused on the Boss RC600, and I felt I was due, or perhaps overdue, to do another one of those. So I've been debating what I wanted this video to be about. A lot of the videos on this channel have been really focused on larger builds or configuration, but the reality, as I'm finding of being a working musician, is that you don't really want to kind of rip things down and rebuild them too much. You want to make sure that, if you're going from, you have 4 days between gigs and you're making the changes, that those changes are digestible as you go from show to show. So with that in mind, I've made several incremental improvements since the last time I talked about my setup, and I wanted to pick one of those in particular to focus on. So for this video, the focus is on making track 4 more accessible. Now, this video could have been called like My Looping Workflow 2025 edition, but there's a couple things that make that not feel right. First, it's really a moving target. As I mentioned, I'm making incremental changes, not all the time, but somewhat frequently. And the other thing is that there's actually more than one workflow that I needed to affect. In fact, as we get into what challenges I was trying to conquer, you'll see that the workflows are actually part of the challenge to this sort of thing. Going into this specific iteration of my setup, I was running into two main problems that I wanted to solve. The first challenge is that the setups I have are all slightly too different from each other. I did a video, I'm pretty proud of it, and it got a lot of attention, thank you for that, on what I call the mini kit. While I owe a video on some of the updates on that, and that will be coming, everything in that setup was very tightly designed, as you can see in the video. And so with the result that I kind of knew what every button in that configuration did. I had far fewer buttons to work with because I had very few external pedals to help me out. And so I had to be really thoughtful about every single thing I did. My main setup, however, which is the one I drive around, the one that I use for most of my gigs, is a lot more luxurious in contrast. So there's many more dedicated pedals and foot switches. I've got octavers and all kinds of goodies. That means that I don't have to run with as many of the onboard effects and shove as many RC600 functions into my setup. I can actually kind of offload that. This had the side effect of meaning that, like, while I was able to do everything I needed to do, there were some kind of leftover buttons and half-formed ideas because I didn't have to be that precise about it. And this actually led to, in some cases, not knowing what buttons in my setup did when I was in the middle of a gig. Basically, when I look at the two relative to each other, the differences were a problem. The third setup, and this is a new setup for me, something I'm calling the micro kit or the uh-oh kit, or fill in your synonym for uh-oh there if you like. That was basically the smallest backup that I could make, something that I could bring to maybe an open mic, but really realistically something I bring with me, I take with me to gigs. Its primary feature is that it is tiny. It is able to fill in. If all else fails, I can still run a loop show off of the micro kit, and it is just an RC600 and one external foot switch. At some point I will probably feature that. It's an interesting experiment in how stripped down can you go and still have the performance feel like you. But at any rate, that was another setup that I was in the midst of making that I really felt like I needed to solve this kind of separation, or the proliferation, if you will, of configurations that was getting a little hard to keep in my head. I've been on my own for long enough. The other major problem, and this will not be a surprise to anyone who's clicked on this video, is just getting better access to track 4. This appears to also be the number of tracks that, for instance, the Head Rush or the Sheeran X have kind of landed on as like the most useful set of tracks, or the most natural limit for the number of tracks that you're going to deal with in a performance. And I have found this to be true. Increasingly, I'm finding as I do arrangements that I want that 4th track. For instance, I might have a percussion for most of the song, a secondary percussion I want to do for like a chorus or something like that, and then 2 other tracks that are more melodic in nature, either that can be kind of layered in, or like an A and a B section. Alternatively, I might have percussion, section A, section B, and then I want that 4th track usually middle of the song, I'm going to add it for like a solo, a bridge, or like backup vocals. So having that fourth track has been increasingly something that I've leaned into, that I've wanted to be able to do without all the cognitive friction that comes with that. And specifically on my mini kit, which puts it in behind a long press, just the need to really pre-plan and really be on board. Because sometimes life comes at you fast and you want to be able to get to your loops when you need to get to them. So with those challenges in mind, specifically, the goal is to get track 4 something that can get to much more easily in a way that is consistent across all 3 of those configurations I mentioned. To give a little bit of a recap that I think will be important for understanding where I go from here, I want to touch briefly on the modes of the RC600 again. So the RC600 can be in one of 3 modes. Each mode of the RC600 changes the function of all 9 of the face buttons, in essence giving you access to 27 button assignments instead of just the 9. You just need to find some way to change the mode. Now, by default, the unit is in mode 1, and you need a dedicated assign, the default of which is shown on the screen, that changes the mode between modes 1, 2, and 3. This can be done with a click to go from mode 1 to 2 to 3, and then back to 1, or you can have it toggle between 1 and 2 with a long press to go into mode 3. My RC600 is configured to use the second way of changing modes, which means that mode 1 and 2 are easiest to access in the moment, and mode 3, which requires a long press, has to be premeditated or planned. Going back to my particular workflow, all of my setups use a pretty similar, almost identical mode 1, quite similar to the unit default, especially for track management. This is really efficient for most of my arrangements since it gives me easy access to the usual operations of tracks 1, 2, and 3, which still covers about 90% of my set list, and also an all start-stop function. Mode 1 also gives me access to a lead tone for my guitar using the same button on every setup. With all that in mind, I decided to focus on finding a way to get access to track 4 in mode 2, so I can toggle to and from it quickly. So if I can add track 4 to mode 2, while also retaining access to tracks 1 through 3 in some way, it'll give me consistent access to 4 tracks in all my setups without any long presses needed. There's been time so confused on my road leads to you, just can't turn and walk away. So as mode 2 is also where my setups diverge quite drastically, and thus is the main cause of my cross-setup confusion, standardizing it to include track 4 would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Since the top row of mode 1 features global toggles, I wanted to try to keep that the same in mode 2. This prevents me from having something stuck on or off behind the mode selector. If, for instance, I enable a lead tone and then switch modes and have no easy way to disable the tone. So I want those 3 buttons to be the same on mode 1 and mode 2. With that, let's look at the bottom 6 buttons. This is what the RC600 factory default has for mode 2 on those buttons. From left to right, you've got a record play option for track 4, followed by a stop option for track 4, and then similar pairings for track 5 and track 6. There are some easy cuts here since I don't use track 5 or 6. With the desire to maintain access to tracks 1 through 3 in some way, I considered a couple options. First, this option I did not go with, but I want to share because I thought others might find it interesting or might be intrigued by trying this. So button 1 has a toggle for play stop on track 1, button 2, same thing for track 2, buttons 3 and 4 are dedicated to record, play, stop operations for track 3, and buttons 5 and 6 are dedicated to the same thing for track 4. This gives me access to 4 tracks, specifically play-only access to tracks 1 and 2, and full access to tracks 3 and 4. This could work, and I illustrate it in case you might want to try it, but I wanted to explore an alternative that unlocks another button to gain access to another thing I didn't currently have access to. Specifically, in my case, a track effect option. Recently, I'd started playing around with using a lo-fi track effect on a couple of arrangements, and I liked the effect, but I didn't have great access to it. I had buried it on mode 3. So since I was changing all my muscle memory anyway, I figured I might want to try to sneak it into this process if I could. That led me to this alternative configuration. Again, left to right, you have track 1 play stop, track 2 play stop, track 3 play stop, then the track effect, B as it happens, then the last 2 buttons are dedicated to track 4. Record, play, and stop. Now this feels very different, but it has everything I want at my, well, toe tips. Track 4 is still relatively easily available, and I can still drive, if not edit, tracks 1 through 3. I also have that lo-fi effect on button 4. It also has a sneaky advantage over the previous option, which is that when you're looking at the looper, you can visually see that you're in this mode, even if the looper is empty, because that 4th button will be off instead of blue. It kind of visually separates itself from mode 1. Since I'm not using an RC600 face button for this switcher, in which case you would actually see a color indicating the current mode, it's useful to have some way to know what mode you're in. So I don't usually talk about this part of the process, but I found that making the change to mode 2 in this way did break a sort of ingrained rule that I had built around the RC600 in my brain. That is that for me, it was always a pair of buttons to manage a track, a play, record, and a stop. And this was the first time I was using play, stop with any kind of regularity. And so I needed to make sure I wasn't, like, for instance, hitting the button to the right of a track to stop it, which would then start another track in some situations. And so what I set out to do was to first update the settings in the mini kit, because I had the longest gap between gigs. I could make the change to the configuration and still have the regular nonsense ready to go, and spend like a week practicing with it. And I found that it went pretty quickly. A couple things really helped with that. One was that I knew that I was making this change across all 3 setups, and there's something very gratifying about finally solving this sort of confusion I have when I go from one setup to another. I knew that once I learned it for one, it was worth learning it for all. The other thing, and this was kind of a sneaky benefit, if you will, was that this usage of mode 1 and mode 2, I felt like it gave both modes a sense of identity. What I mean by that is that in the workflow, mode 1 is where I start. It's where I build my loops, and for the vast majority of my arrangements, it's all I need. Whereas mode 2 is where I go for the fancier arrangements, track 4, the lo-fi stuff, and it puts me in a sort of a DJ remix mode and a little augmentation. So it's kind of like coarse grain and fine grain control of my loops. And I felt that made the 2 modes make more sense to me. The good news is that I was able to get up and running again inside of, I'd say, a week or so. And I wasn't really making that many more mistakes than I would normally make, at least as a result of this, and was able to more comfortably drive track 4, or 4-track, I should say, arrangements quite quickly.
Stop the world and meld with you.
Okay, so I'm now down here at the looper I figured it was a good idea to give a little demonstration of specifically how I'm able to drive track 4 using this configuration. So right now I've got a loop preloaded on the looper. I'm using closing time, which is an example I've used elsewhere on the channel, both as a tutorial and as a song that I've covered, for instance, and I play relatively frequently. So I'm going to be starting the song in the middle at the chorus, going into the bridge. And so right now there are 3 loops set up. You're only going to hear 2 of them in the performance. One's just there for completeness, for how the looper would look going into this song if I was playing it live. So track 1, which now I'm in mode 1, is over here, is the drums. Track 2 is the chorus, including bass. And track 3 is the verse, which will not be featured, but again, I have it there just to be complete so that you know why I'm using track 4 instead of why not use track 3, it's empty. I'm not going to show it in the song, but it is going to be there when I'm playing the song live. Now, if I go to mode 2, you can kind of see where those lit buttons move down. This is track 1, 2, and 3. One other button I want to call attention to is over here. This A on the FS7 is my starts tracks 1 and 2 together. So just so you know what's going on there. And finally, over here on the right, you can see I've got my track effects, but I'm not going to be using that. But I've got track 4 ready to go, empty right now. And you can see the tempo blinking on the track 4 stop. So with that, I'm going to start the song again at the chorus, and then I'm going to add this bridge section. I'm going to add that on track 4. So here we go.
I know who I want to take me home. I know who I someone to take me home, take me home.
And so on. So a little mistake there in one of the parts on the bridge. But that's the basic idea. I'm able to go into mode 2, create this. You can see this loop is still hanging out there on track 4, and then jump back out again if I need to. And in this case, I choose to go back to mode 1. I could run the loop from mode 2, but I actually have aspirations to add something to track 2. And another thing I consider is if I'm not going to use track 4 again, and in this song I won't, then I jump out of mode 2 so I don't accidentally start it. You know, I could go either way with it, basically. So with that, I'm going to get back to other me on the screen here.
Those horses and the boyfriends too.
So I've been using this for a couple months now, and I'm sort of left with a question, which is, would I recommend this? I mean, I did a whole video on it, so you kind of hope to some extent I do. And mostly yes. Yes, with some caveats. I set out to make track 4 much more consistent and more accessible so I could use it into more of my arrangements, and I think it's a big success on that front. It's still a little bit weird having mode 1 and mode 2 be so different from each other, but I really like having them be consistent across all my devices, and I really like, as I mentioned in the section on adaptation, how it gives those modes a role and makes them feel different in a way that can be an advantage in practice. So as my goal was to be able to use 4 loops, or 4 tracks I should say, for more of my loop arrangements, it's definitely a big success. And from the perspective of if you're at a place where you're comfortable with the looper, but you feel you're kind of stuck in the same ceiling, that 3 tracks is easy, but anything more is awkward, I would say, yeah, go for it. If 4 is your target, this is a really interesting way to get to it. And I actually really like it. While I am still looking at ways of getting more functionality into my loop rig, I think that in a world where sometimes I'm running with much less gear, this is fantastic. This means that even when I'm stripped down to the micro kit, I'm able to do pretty much all of my arrangements without any modifications, except for like what tones are available. And that's worth it to me. So if you find yourself in the situation where being able to strip things down and use onboard features more is useful, yeah, I'd say it's a good way to go. And I'd love to hear any feedback in the comments for anyone who tries it and how they find this. So to provide a little more tangible demonstration and show the setup in action, I'm going to be linking to a video that I released at the same time I'm releasing this video, which is a loop cover of Hozier's 2 Suite, which is, I think, a really good illustration of the way this workflow plays out. It builds most of the song in mode 1 and then goes to mode 2 to add a 4th track and then drive the song from that point forward entirely in mode 2. So I think it's a really clean example of this workflow in action at its best. If you are watching that video and if you've seen this video, know that if you turn on English captions, I actually will describe everything I'm doing with the loop as I go, which will mostly be pretty front-loaded. Most of that song is just singing and playing in the guitar and turning things on and off. But at the beginning, there's a lot of like what I'm building, why I'm clicking things, etc. So you hopefully can follow it more easily. I also have other videos that I've done recently on the channel that I recorded at the same time as I recorded this, which was Land of Confusion by Genesis, which I'm personally very fond of that arrangement, and Push It by Garbage. Both of those do feature 4 tracks. Push It features it much more heavily, and I think that they can kind of show you a little bit of how I'm stretching into that 4th track and incorporating it into my arrangements. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and let me know you liked it. Comments, likes, all the standard drill. I am slowly but surely growing this channel. It's as I record this, it's not quite at 1,000 subscribers. I'm certainly hoping to grow it past and through that barrier and beyond. But really, it's just kind of, it's nice to know that I'm reaching people, and some of the comments I've gotten have really been very validating in terms of the value or the use of this kind of content. So I enjoy making these. They do take a lot of work, and it's nice to know, and the ways that YouTube lets you tell me that this is useful to you.
When everybody loves you, you can never be lonely. Well, I'm gonna paint my picture.
But wait, there's more. Just one more little thing. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching. If you've gotten to this point, you're awesome. But also, a kind of thank you to the community, or whatever I've got going on here, for something that's happened to me the second time in this series, which is, as I was writing the script for this video, I realized I was describing a configuration I was not fully happy with. And it forced me to go back in and change it. And so specifically in this case, I changed the location of the track effect. When I started writing the script for this, I actually had it on button 6, which was kind of confusing because it meant that, for the first 3 buttons, stop was the start. For the 4th button, the stop was next to it, and something about them being adjacent to each other really messed with me. In addition to the fact that it was buttons 4 and 5 that were a pair, which is kind of like an odd number. Anyway, it was a mess. I was making it work, but I was not loving it. I still would have had most of the same conclusion, but it was definitely not where I wanted it to be. It was actually writing the section, would I recommend this, that made me go, wait a second. And that's when I moved button 6 to where 4 is, slotted the other 2 over, and it's so much better. So again, the idea that it actually improves my own workflow and makes my own loop arrangement better, or my own loop configuration better, is kind of a wild, bonus feature. So thank you for everyone for tuning in, for giving me encouragement to keep doing this. I love doing this. I'm enjoying the growth, not just of the channel, but of my skills around this sort of thing. And for those of you who are still here, I have a question, which is, I am not entirely sure what I want the next video to be. I think it's going to be one of 2 things. Either a introduction to the micro kit. I'm going to try to keep it as short as this video, which I'm getting in the right direction. I think it's going to be about 20 minutes. Or a update to the MIDI kit to add a MIDI controller. So specifically focusing on MIDI and the ways that mini kit has become kind of a little pedal board, basically. They're probably both going to happen. It's just kind of a question of which one I want to do first. The other one that's coming at some point probably is a little bit of how I got into doing music full time. I think my journey is a little unusual, and I don't know, it's kind of fun to look back on how that's gone at this point. I'm about 2 years into my full-time music journey. If someone wants to hear that first, cool. And that's probably going to be the easier video to do, but yeah, if one of those topics jumps off the page at you or off the video screen, let me know. And apart from that, I hope you folks have a great day wherever you are. Stay safe out there. It's a little wild in the world in places, but I hope that everyone is well, and I'll catch you in the next video.